Thank you so much for being on the show. I'm excited to chat with you this morning on just bettering ourselves. I think that is, it's a continued thing that's like in the back of my mind, always wanting to be a better version. And I think it's really powerful. But yeah, anyway, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, it's
Absolutely.
great to be here.
Yeah. I mentioned this before we started recording, but I really like your setup. I'm a little bit envious. I'm like slowly starting to put things in my background to fill it so it's not just a blank wall. But
Yeah, our last house, we've been in this house for a year, and our last house I was just in a white box. And so I told my wife when we move into the new place, like, I'm going to decorate my office because this is like people see me on Zoom all day, every day. And so I'm like, it's got to be interesting behind me.
yeah, it's like half, I see all of these like TikTokers that just have like a blank room. It looks like it's just like they're in some model home or something and just like squatting to do their reels. And I'm like, half of me was like, oh yeah, I should just like empty one half of my office just to have a blank wall. But then I'm like, no, it's way too boring. I want to have things behind me. But yeah,
that's all my books and tchotchkes I've collected over the years.
Yeah, it's fun. It's character, like your coffee mug there. Like that's a good character coffee mug.
This was a gift from a couple that we shot a wedding at Emerald Lake Lodge, and so
nice.
Yeah, it's just like my daily drinker now.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, same. This one was from a couple. I did their wedding in Costa Rica, and it was like a local. I don't know if it's actually like a local person who like handcrafted this or if it's a local person who bought a bunch of them and was selling them on the side of the road. But yeah, it's a good daily drinking mug. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so Dave, give us a little background about you, where you're based, what you do, and all the things Dave Moss.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm based in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. Which in the last 3 days, winter has come. It is below zero with 8 inches of snow out of nowhere.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So we weren't expecting it this early, but it's here. I was a computer engineer, a network engineer for a lot of years, interested in photography. I grew up wanting to be a photographer. My dad was one of those dads who had every issue of Nat Geo on the shelf, and I would read them all. And I grew up wanting to be either an archaeologist or a war photographer. Those were my two things that I wanted to do, not knowing anything about war photography when I was young. Yeah, and so my dad, probably wisely, talked me out of going into photography school, not wanting me to end up in a war zone somewhere in the world. And I went into computer science instead, but still loved photography and kept shooting throughout the years. Started shooting a couple of weddings, as we all do, just sort of for free for friends. And then it just sort of steamrolled from there. And then I met my now wife. I was supposed to photograph a New Year's Eve party and got appendicitis the night before.
Oh, wow.
And so she ended up photographing it instead. And I was looking at the photos afterwards and being like, oh, these are really good. And I saw a photo of her. I thought, oh, she's really cute. And I didn't know any other photographers at the time, so I pursued her. And 3 months after we started dating, we started our photography company, Abby Plus Dave. And so our business is as old as our relationship. It's worked out for us. And then in 2017, I started burning out a little bit on photography. At that point in time, we'd been shooting for 9 years, 30 plus weddings, 50 plus engagement sessions a year.
Yeah.
And we're just starting to burn out. And so I started looking for something new and stumbled across life coaching of all things, not really knowing what it was at the time. But I met a friend who was doing it, and then some clients for an engagement session where they were both life coaches, were selling their house and moving to Italy because they could do it remote. And I'm just like, okay, what is this thing? Found a course I was interested in taking through a woman named Martha Beck, who was Oprah's life coach and a multi-award-winning author. And her course started in a week. And I was like, okay, I got to bite the bullet if I'm going to do this thing. It was a 10-month program. And so I'm just like, whatever, let's do it. It was a lot of money at the time, but I just dove in, and it completely transformed my life. Changed me from being a very left brain, logical thinking person into more of a right brainy, feely person. And then when I finished that program, I thought, I think I can help entrepreneurs and photographers and creatives with this. And spoke to a business coach, and they said, look, I've got an idea for you, and you might not like it, but you've been running a successful business for over a decade. Photographers may not want life coaching, but they definitely want business coaching. So why don't you start a business coaching practice and then trick them into life coaching once they're working with you? And so I did, and it's been really successful, and I've been doing that mostly for the last 5 years. We've gone down to sort of 5 to 10 weddings a year in our wedding business. And that's my main bread and butter now is coaching entrepreneurs, not just photographers now. I have a fashion designer, graphic designers, someone who's starting a magazine. It sort of runs the whole gamut of creative professionals now that I do life and business coaching for. And yeah, that's my full-time gig, and I love it.
That's cool. I love the little trickery of the you signed up for business coaching. You're still gonna get that, but in the way of life coaching.
Yeah, well, you're here
because like that. I mean, that was a smart little piece of advice that you got because I know for me, like I don't know, 5 years ago or so, whenever I first started getting into receiving business advice. If someone was just like, oh yeah, you need, here's some life advice, or you need a life coach. I'm like, I don't need a life coach. It's fine. My life is fine. I need a business coach. But yeah, so much of your business is your life. And, and I've just the little bit that I've been growing, over the last few years in myself and really learning more about myself, who I am, what motivates me, what fears I have, all those kinds of things. Those have been shifting and transforming the way that I operate my business as well, which was a pleasant surprise. That was not what I was expecting. And I love that you mentioned the left brain, right brain thing. Mm-hmm. Which I always get those confused, probably because there's just two of them. But left brain is the more logical. Is that correct?
Technically, yeah. Apparently, science has debunked a lot of this now, but it's still the way a lot of people. A lot of the people still see the world that way, where left brain is logical and right brain is creative.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Because I have a very logical. This is how things are. These are the steps to take to get to this. Kind of brain. Mm-hmm. And yeah, through learning more about myself and learning, doing little life coaching things and following different life coaches on social media, kind of hearing from them, I have found myself being much more in tune to my emotions, which is funny because whenever my wife and I got married, which fun thing. We got married in January of 2013, and then I started my photography business 3 months later. So very similar. Whenever I'm trying to figure out how long I've been in business, I'm like, oh yeah, we're celebrating 10 years in January. So almost 10 years. But whenever we first started dating and that relationship, my wife was very not very emotional. That doesn't sound right. She's very in tune to her emotions. Mm-hmm. And I was not at all. And just I don't know, I don't feel anything about this. And over the years, I'm slowly starting to I think shift more into bringing in that right brain, the more creative and emotional side of me, which I'm loving. I'm exciting, or that's exciting me a lot. Just kind of that shift.
Yeah, it's an interesting process. I grew up being all IQ focused, going through STEM programs and, all of these things, wanting to collect every, science badge when I was a Boy Scout and all the rest of those things, and not being an emotional kid really at all. And until, I was in my 30s when I finally started to get in touch with that, and I realized how stunted I was looking back now, not not believing that feeling or emotion has any bearing in our life. And my wife, much the same. Women just have higher EQ, I think, in general.
Yeah.
But she was always very in touch with her emotions, very empathic. And she would just look at me and she's like, "How do you go through life like a robot? It's so weird to me." So yeah, it's a process, and I mean, it's a thing that a lot of, I think, men go through later on in life, especially guys of our generation and younger, because we're allowed to be in touch with our emotions now. It's no longer something that is frowned upon.
Yes, yeah, which I am so looking forward. Like we talked a little bit about my son, who's almost 8. He's homesick from school today. So if there are knocks on the door, that's what that break will be. But I'm very excited for him, like when he is in his mid-20s, and the emotional stability that I hope that he will have that I did not have at that age, because like this next generation, a lot of us are raising them to be more in tune with emotions, and that it is okay to be a dude and to like show emotions. Mm-hmm. And it's okay to cry about things. And mm-hmm. like there's a lot of stuff that wasn't necessarily like, I wasn't raised of like the you don't cry, what are you doing, and like that kind of thing, but there was like those undertones of that's not something that you really do. So I'm excited for the next generation and how we're getting more and more in tune with feelings and emotions, and allowing that to be the norm.
Totally. I mean, I think especially in our line of work too, as photographers and lifestyle photographers in particular, whether you're doing mm-hmm. family or boudoir or wedding or anything else like that. I mean, the whole premise is emotionality and human connection. And so I found once I got better in touch with that stuff, I became a better photographer. I could see it more. I could feel it more in the room. I knew what mm-hmm. people would want from their photographs. Whereas before, it was almost like I was just checking off a checklist. I was a very technical photographer instead of a feeling photographer. Yeah.
Like, I know this is going to happen. There's a speech going on right now. Let me pan over to the parents. Yeah, they're crying. Let me take a picture of that. Exactly. Instead of like, oh, I can feel this speech. I can feel where this is going. And then using that kind of emotional intuition mm-hmm. to guide your photography, which I love. This is like layers and layers into just like being a better photographer. And so much of photography is not the technical things of where's the light coming in, and what settings do I need to have. That's all important. And as you go years into photography, is just like your camera is just part of your hands. Mm-hmm. You know what you're doing, and you see the light. You're like, okay, cool. Let me switch this. Change my aperture real quick, and then you're good to go. And allows that kind of second nature allows you to be more in tune with the emotions going on in the room, instead of always focusing on the technical side of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, okay, awesome. I'm loving this conversation already, Dave. This is so good. Something that I'm always curious about when I get to talk to my guests is, has there been a piece of advice or a lesson or anything in your career or just your life that has really changed the way that you look at business?
Yeah. I stumbled across, I can't even remember where. It's probably from a million different places over the years, but there's a quote from a guy named Jim Rohn that says, "You are the sum of the 5 people you spend the most time with." And that has been probably one of my biggest pieces that I've carried with me. And whenever somebody asks me for a piece of advice, I say that because I've really lived it, especially over the last sort of 5 years. Realizing the friends that I spend time with, the other creatives and business owners that I spend time with. For the record, I'm anti-hustle culture, but I like hanging out with photographers and business owners who are achieving something. They're going towards a goal. They're going towards a dream, not at the expense of their family or their life, but because they want to be there. And that has really helped both my wife and I do the same thing. My little asterisk to that quote is always now it also includes the media you consume, because I realized when I, changed the types of books I read, the podcasts I listened to, the TV shows I watched, that also had a huge effect on my thought patterns, my behavior, my habits, and things like that. So yeah, that's sort of like, just be aware of who you are spending time with and what it is that you're listening to has been absolutely instrumental, because at the early part of our career, I had a group of friends who always wanted to hang out and party. And of course, we're out shooting weddings every weekend and things like that. And they're just like, oh, just come out after the wedding. You don't have to worry about importing the cards or doing whatever. And I came across this concept called crab bucket mentality of like, if you put a bunch of crabs in the bucket, they can all easily climb out, but the crabs at the bottom will pull the crabs at the top back into the bucket. And so they just say, stay in here with us. We can all suffer together. And I don't think my friends at the time were doing that consciously, but they wanted me to stay with them instead of move on and thrive in the areas that I wanted to. And so now I want to be with people who are going to reach down and lift me up instead of pulling me back down.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's that. I love that analogy too with the crabs. 'Cause I definitely felt that as well. Starting a photography business in my mid-20s, where everyone was wanting to party and go out and stay up super late, which I am also a night owl, so that part I was like, cool, I'm good with hanging out till like 3 a.m. whatever, as long as I don't have to shoot a wedding the next day. But yeah, like it really changed the way, even with other photographers early on, where I was looking at growing the business and really bettering myself and becoming a better photographer, a better person, a better, I don't really even know what word to use, but just the way that I interact with my clients, and just being a better resource and person for them. And a lot of the other photographers that I was around early on were just like, I'm just in here for the money. Like, there's money in weddings. I really don't care. Like, I will just hang out and I will shoot these weddings. And as long as they keep coming in, that's all I really worry about. And there was a very stark difference between those two that I'm glad that I saw early on, because I just kind of like that, not consciously, but that just kind of like moved us apart to where I didn't really hang out with them much and I wasn't talking to them much. I was always looking to be, and still look to be, like the dumbest person in the room. Like, I always want to be around people that are just like 10 steps ahead, and not in a way of like, let me pick your brain and like, here, give me all this free advice, but just like, you get to see from them, what life looks like, being more successful and being more in tune with like your body and yourself and those kind of things. I'm always looking for that, which a lot of that is online these days. Just, it's 2022 right now, and things are still kind of all weird from the pandemic. And I think that was really difficult for me, was that some of the 5 people around you turned into like, okay, that is the 5 people in my family. Like, I'm not around anyone anymore. So yeah, that was difficult, and really shifted to who am I taking in through social media, online, in the news, all of that.
Yeah, I make my clients do a Facebook group audit and an Instagram account audit when we work together, to see what is taking energy away from you and what is giving energy. Because sometimes we'll be in groups or we'll be following people. I don't know if you're familiar with the term of the hate follow, where you just, and I'm just like, is that actually doing any benefit for you? And I make them write it out, and every single time they're like, I went and unfollowed all of those accounts or groups, and I feel so much better. Yeah. And there have even been some people that I like didn't really hate follow, or maybe I did. I just didn't realize that it was like that comparison follow, where I'm just like, look at them, they're off to Paris again, and they're traveling around. And then like, whenever I'm looking at them, I'm like, yeah, but they don't have any kids. Like, there's no family at home. They don't have to, not have to, but they don't get to stay at home and like
kick the soccer ball around in the backyard and that kind of stuff. I'm like, okay, yeah, this, like, whenever I'm putting it into perspective, it's great. But that moment of just like scrolling and I'm like, oh, they're on another airplane. Like, where are they? They're headed to Dubai now. What is going on? And those people, I was like, I've got to at least mute or just stop following them at least for a season, because I was getting too much into my head of, why not me? Why am I not there? Like, I want to go do this.
Yeah.
And that was not moving me forward at all in the business, and taking way too much of my mental bandwidth of focusing on that instead of focusing on the things that actually mattered that were around me.
Yeah. Yeah, it's huge.
Yeah. So what are some areas that we can grow and become like better versions of ourselves as we're looking around in our business and just life?
Yeah. To sort of keep this in the business and photography realm, there's two things I've really seen over the last couple of years in business owners that I think is a good lesson to learn and change and grow in. The first is that failure is iterative, not a stopping point. So many people are afraid of failure and afraid of that type of change. I did a personal project for myself in 2018 where I emailed over 200 photographers all around the world the same 20 questions. And one of those questions was, how do you feel about failure and how do you deal with failure? And easily like 75% of people were afraid of it or hated it. And would actively avoid doing things in their business because they were afraid of that failure. And conversely, the 25% or so of people who embraced failure in that same questionnaire also reported higher levels of happiness and higher amounts of income because they were willing to take the risks and maneuver away from the failure. So that is definitely something that I would really implore any of your listeners or just anybody in general to start to embrace, is the fact that failure is not a stopping point. If you do something and it doesn't work, it's just a blueprint for the next time you do that thing. It is it's a decision tree. You can go this way or you can go that way to try it again, to do it a different way. And that has been a huge thing for me. I was afraid of change and failure my whole life. My wife and I had a joke early on in our relationship that she'll change things every 10 minutes, and I might change one thing a year.
Yeah.
So thankfully that's changed in me over the years, but it was true. Like, I was the kind of guy who would stay in the job even though I hated it because it was a job and it was safe and it was comfortable and whatever, and I can suck it up being miserable 8 hours a day rather than going and finding something different. But now, I take the risks and I do different things and try different things. And even on wedding days, like, we no longer believe in the concept of the safe shot. We both shoot like primary shooters, and we both take big risks and do those things. And it's worked out better for our art. It's worked out better for our clients. And a sort of tangential piece of advice to that is just do it scared. Like, a lot of people, they're like, okay, but I'm still afraid of it. What do I do? I'm just do it scared. Liz Gilbert talked about this in her book, Big Magic, where she's like, fear gets to be in the car, but it doesn't get to drive. It can be in the back seat whispering in your ear saying, this is going to fail. You're not going to do it, but you're the one in control. And so just do it scared and just do it anyways. I had a client this week who was afraid to make a post on her Instagram offering her new packages because she thought people would find it super salesy and would get turned off and would unfollow her Instagram account. Yep. And I told her to do it anyways, and she did it. And the next morning I got an email from her saying, I just got 4 new family inquiries and a new wedding inquiry just by posting my offerings on my Instagram. So thank you for making me do it scared. Yeah. So sometimes you just got to suck it up and go.
Yeah. Yeah. I think like right along that same vein was something that I heard a couple years ago that I'd never thought of in terms of fear, which is that courage is not doing it, unafraid, but courage is being afraid, being scared, having that fear, but then doing it anyway. and that's it. It's like, it's that overcoming the fear is actually courage, because I was that same way of just like, I had a huge like approval idol. I just wanted everyone to approve of me, and I was like, I'm a firstborn. I was the good kid. Not that my brother was that bad, but like I was always just like, yes, whatever it is, I will do this. And then I would just look for others' approval always. And because of that, I was afraid to take risks, because I was like, what if I do this and then I fail, and then people look at me and they're like, look at John, he failed. Like, how did we even think that he was a good business person? Or there's a lot of people who, when I left my 9-to-5 job, were just like, so what are you doing? Like, where are you going? I know you have this little photography hobby on the side, but like, what's going on? I'm like, no, that's not a hobby. It's been a business for a couple of years now. But like that fear of, what if I go and then I have one more season of weddings and then the business dries up and I can't book anything, and what about, like, what happens then? And I think a good question to ask is just like, well, then what? Like, what would happen? I go back to my other job? Okay. Yeah. Like, or go find a different one, or start a new business venture. There's, I love the idea of taking risks, because when there's a bigger risk, there's a bigger reward at the end of it. And not taking risks for the majority of my life left me with just like tiny little rewards, because I was like, oh yeah, like you mentioned, staying in a job that you hated, just because it's a job. When I got my first job out of college, I was like, cool, I guess I'll be here for like 40 years and then retire. Like, that's what I know. Yep. And I'm just going to stay here, even though it's a toxic work environment. I can power through for 8 to 9 hours a day, which is a huge chunk of your day when you're thinking about it. But I'm like, it's fine. I'll have the evenings and the weekends unless I get called in. But yeah, it's I think that is something to really think of, or think about for the listeners. Just like, where can you take risks? And where do you feel yourself, like your body, your soul being like, I really want to do this, but I'm afraid if I fail, it might be time to do that.
Yeah. And I mean, it can be a calculated risk, and you also don't have to take the risks alone. Entrepreneurs, we're often islands, in our home offices by ourselves all the time.
Yep.
Get a coach or get a group of other business owners and talk with one another. Other people have been where you are sitting right now, and sometimes they'll have great advice to get through it, or read books. I love reading biographies to learn about the risks that people took and the worries. Like, I just finished Dave Grohl's book, and man, the risks that man took to end up where he ended up were astronomical. But it and it didn't always work out for him, but when it did, it worked out huge. And so, but he had a good support network, and he had other people who had been in the music industry who could give him advice, and it was beneficial. And there's tons of photographers out there and tons of other creative business owners who, buy him a cup of coffee and sit down and say, I want to do this thing, but I'm afraid, and just hear what they have to say about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that, which I need to check out Dave Grohl's autobiography. I didn't realize he had one. I was like, oh man, I love Dave.
Oh, yeah. Like, I did the audiobook because he reads it himself, and it was wild. Yeah.
That's going to be good. I'm going to take notes, John, whenever you're editing this later. Write that down, get that audiobook. But yeah, I think that is so good. I've never thought about that with like autobiographies. I always felt like they were just I don't know, just kind of like boring. I've never read one. So that was just what I had heard from other people, or just like what I assumed. Like, oh, you're reading the autobiography of Benjamin Franklin. I don't know if he wrote an autobiography, but like you're reading a biography at least. Like it just sounds like boring. Like this is what I did in my life, but there is so much to learn from people's lives, especially if they're putting it in a book. There's something big there that you can learn. So yeah, I'm gonna have to start getting more autobiographies.
I'd also recommend Born a Crime by Trevor Noah, also who reads it himself on an Audible. So
okay,
yeah, another good one.
I do like Trevor's voice.
Yes.
Yeah, and that would be an interesting story, because I don't know too much about him coming from South Africa.
Neither did I, and boy was it eye-opening.
Yeah, okay, cool. Yeah, I just pretty much knew him. Like, he just showed up after Jon Stewart left The Daily Show, and I was like, who is this guy? Like, I love Jon. Like, he's the best. And I was like, I don't know if this guy's going to be able to fill his shoes. And then he did. And I've loved Trevor Noah over the last, like, 7 years or whatever. He's been doing that, which he is now stepping away. So it'll be another interesting transition. I'm interested to see who's going to step in there. But like, so kind of bringing us back to business, with the continued growth of ourselves and looking for ways to grow as a person, how does that look? I know we've kind of touched on this a little bit, but like, what are maybe some tangible ways of how that really shows up in being a business owner and an entrepreneur?
Yeah. I mean, the one that I see time and time and time again is money baggage. We all have money baggage, whether it came from our parents or a past partner or ourselves or, a hard time in our lives. We all have a weird relationship with money. And that is not a business problem. That is a self problem. And so oftentimes when I work with new clients, and one of the first things I always have them do is send me their sales info and send me their pricing and everything else like that, and then we have the hard conversation about you're not pricing for your life, you're not pricing for profit, you're just pricing because you're scared. And we have that talk of, why are you doing this? And it's often it's a mixture of they don't believe that they're good enough, and then also they have some sort of fear or baggage around money. And so working on that, releasing that from their past, getting over that part of themselves, helping them gain the confidence that they are actually good enough and that they have value, and then releasing the fear of money can help them make more money. And so it's in that regard that being a better person made them a better business owner, which then also frees them up to become a better photographer, because so many people are stifled in their life, worried about, how am I going to pay the next bill? Am I going to keep my apartment? Is my truck going to get impounded? Anything like this. And that all stems back to, more often than not, the way that their parents handled money, and that just carried on, and they've never thought about it or never looked at it in their life. And that's where sort of the tricky life coaching comes into my business, where we look at that sort of thing and we have those hard conversations, and there's usually a lot of tissues on those calls, but we unpack it and we unravel it, and then we make a plan to move forward. And I'm not just going to tell people, oh, get over your money stuff, because it doesn't work like that. Like this is a continued journey. I had one client, it took us the better part of a year to get through that. And this woman went from, annually grossing around $27,000 a year in her business to close to six figures, not over, but close. But for her, that was a complete lifestyle change. Almost tripling her income was a massive change in her life. And I could see it when she showed up on calls afterwards. She used to have calls where her body language would be tight, her shoulders would be up. She'd be constantly worrying, thinking, I got to get more clients. And after we did that, now it was more, oh, I had these clients this week that they allowed me to shoot the way that I want to shoot. She was no longer thinking about the money, because money is an unfillable well. I never want people to chase the money. That's not the reason why you should be doing it, because you could be a billionaire and still want more money. We see that every day.
Oh yeah.
It's what you're going to do with that money and the freedom that that brings, but that often ties back into the baggage. You know, when I was a kid, we didn't have this, or my parents always fought over this, and so on, and we don't realize that we're carrying those bags around with us. So that personal growth in a lot of different ways, whether it's confidence, whether it's money, whether it's creativity, you know, all of that will make us a better photographer in the end and make us a better business owner in the end. And that's the hard sell. You know, it's easy for me to sell to photographers or creatives and say, I can help you make more money, or I can help you work less, or anybody wants to buy that.
Right.
But when I say we're going to do deep work on yourself so that you're going to be a better person, which is going to make everything easier in the rest of your life, that's a hard sell. People don't believe it. So that's where we have to sort of like slowly ease into that sort of thing.
Yeah, because that's difficult. And there's a lot of things, you know, I could see a lot of fear in like, oh, we're going to look into me? Like, but what are we going to find? I'm a little afraid of what we're going to find when we look into me. Like, let's just look at the business. Like, we can talk bad about the business and like find some things that we need to work on there. That's cool. I don't want to work on stuff on myself. Like, that's difficult to do.
But we're not a Fortune 500, you know. It's like we're the finance department, we're the PR department, we're the marketing department, and so we're the only driver behind that. It's not a group of people where you're getting the best of 10 people to figure it out. It always comes back to us. Yeah.
It's funny that you mentioned that money is a big thing, like our viewpoint of money and how we handle that, because that's what I see a lot with talking to other photographers. Is I'm like, okay, so do you have separate personal accounts and business accounts? So, well, you know, I have like a Excel spreadsheet of like what's in my business account. I'm like, okay, this is a step here, which I definitely had like a poverty mindset of money, which still creeps in every now and then. Still working on that, but I grew up with not a lot, and there was always that idea in the back of my mind of like, but what if it all goes? Like, I need to at the same time, like two different mindsets at the same time, hoard money. And like, I'm not going to go buy that new camera. I'm not going to go invest in this course because I need to have a stockpile just in case something happens. But then also at the same time, just like spending money on like little things to make me happy, and to like, you know, little tiny, you know, $100, $200, $500 purchases in gear, instead of like I can't afford the $2,000 camera, but I will spend about $3,000 in a 6-month period on these little things. And it's been very interesting looking into that. You know, being married and having different, not two different viewpoints on money, but viewing it from different ways has been very interesting. And like you said, we are we're the CFOs of our own businesses, because for most of us, we are solopreneurs and we're doing everything. So yeah, that's probably a good first step for everyone to look at. How are you dealing with your money? I know tax season is coming around quicker than we would like. You know, we're nearing the end of the year, and you know, lots of Q4 stuff coming up. But yeah, that's something that we don't like to talk about, is money. And,
people hate talking about it. They love earning it, and they love, you know, how do I get more clients and how do I do this, but they don't
love saying that I own a 6-figure business, but I don't want to talk about like how I'm getting there or what I'm doing with those 6 figures. Or even are they actually bringing home 6 figures at the end of it? Because that's also the great myth in business, where everybody's like, oh, I'm a 6-figure business, but they're paying themselves $14,000 at the end of the year or whatever. Yeah. First year that my business brought in 6 figures, I brought home 28,000.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, there is a disconnect here. I need to pay myself because I'm doing a lot of work to get my business to this point. And there's a lot of budgeting that goes into running a successful business, and it's difficult. I know, like for me, having that kind of poverty mindset, whenever you see $20,000-$30,000 sitting in the bank, it's like, I can go do whatever I want. Like I can spend this, but then you have all these things that are allocated coming out in the next month. I'm like, oh, nope, I really only had 12,000. So yeah, that's a whole nother conversation, but a really important place for people to start to better themselves and really have those conversations and like, all right, what does this look like for me? How do I budget? Do I budget? How am I allocating things and separating stuff? I still haven't really dove into this app much, but I had Joseph West on the podcast sometime last year, and he talked about the app called Catch, like catching a baseball. Mm-hmm. And it is it's an app that like you sync with your bank account, and then you can tell it like this certain percentage goes to savings, this percentage goes to taxes and all that, and it separates it for you. So you can just pull up the app and be like, oh, this is the small amount that I actually have for just expenditures, buying new gear and all that. Which I really need to like fully set that up. I like set it up to where I have like everything and then taxes. But I need to go in there a little bit more. But yeah.
We do. My wife and I, we took this from some friends of ours. We don't use it was called Wine and Wine-Ab Night because I used to use the app You Need a Budget. We use Mint now instead of that, but we do it once a quarter where we sit down and we just go through everything because for us it does the same thing where it auto transfers and lets us all know. But it's like It's important to look at the numbers every now and again instead of just assuming that you're fine. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Until it's the end of the year and you're putting everything together for your CPA and you're like, oh, that's how much I spent on this.
Yeah.
Whoops. Okay. Maybe I should change that in the next year. And then you don't. No. But yeah, I like that idea. I like incorporating wine into this as well.
You got to make it fun. That's an Atomic Habits thing where it's like, you got to habit stack. You got to sandwich the bad things between good things. Cause I hate budgeting. Like it is every fiber of my being recoils from it, but I've learned how important it is. So it's like, okay, we're gonna drink some wine, we're gonna eat some charcuterie or whatever, and we're gonna look at the budget.
Yeah. I think that's great. I love Atomic Habits. It's such a good book.
Yes.
And that habit stacking of like, this is something that I know I don't want to do, but I need to do it. So I'm gonna stack it with something that I do enjoy. And then put those together, and it's much more enjoyable. I think that's a great way of, for anyone who's just like, I don't really want to work on myself. I don't want to, this is going to be vulnerable. I'm going to have to, learn about myself and then like have to do something about it. Because once I know this about myself, I can't just live and just be like, all right, well, that's fine. I'm okay with this.
Yeah. Dude, make it fun. Like I can't read self-help books. I always audiobook them, and I always do it while I'm hiking because then I'm doing something that I love, but then I'm learning about myself, and then I always carry a little notebook with me, and I'll just write some things down. But like if I had to just like sit at home and read a self-development book, I would be like, well, I could be doing a million other more fun things right now.
Yeah. Like if whenever I fold the laundry here at the house, which we have 3 kids, so there's a ton of laundry. They go through so many clothes. I don't know what they're doing. But like as I'm folding, I can't be listening to a self-help book because like that is work and also laundry is work. I'm always listening to like a comedy podcast or watching a TV show or something while I'm doing that because it's putting fun and responsibility together, and that's how I can get through it. Otherwise, it'd just be like, okay, I don't feel like doing this right now.
No, the laundry would never get done.
They can dive through this laundry basket and find something that's wrinkled for them. It's cool. But yeah, okay, well, awesome, Dave. This has been so good. I have loved this conversation, and I am just, I don't know, I'm feeling excited to really dive into more things about myself, and to better myself. Before we wrap up the show, there's a part of the show that I like to do where we talk about what we're loving this week, and it can really be anything, TV show, book, whatever. What are you loving this week?
Oh man, so many things. I'll choose two. So
Cool.
number one thing that I'm loving this week, anybody who knows anything about me knows that I am a huge Dungeons and Dragons nerd. I have been playing it for 27 years.
Nice.
And on the point of comedy podcasts, there is a comedy Dungeons and Dragons podcast called Dungeons and Daddies that I've been listening to, and it is it is delightful. That's very irreverent and fun and funny, and it's like when I'm washing the dishes or doing things like that, same thing. That's not work time because I'm already doing the work. So that is definitely something that I have been loving. It's very niche. Very few people will probably be like, I want to listen to that, but I have been loving it. The other thing is modern veterinarian medicine, because our dog recently got diagnosed with lymphoma, and so I've been really grateful for the vets and all the help that they've been able to give us to make sure our dog's gonna keep on ticking.
Yeah. That was good. It's the I have a lot of vet friends. I attract them apparently, which is great. Like, we have no pets, probably will one of these days, but we have 3 kids and we're like, they are pets enough. But yeah, it like listening to them and talking to them about, the different things that they do, for these animals. I'm just like, I really appreciate what you're doing. I've always like appreciated vets, but more now that I know like everything that goes into it. It's not just like, all right, well, you need to, give this medicine to your dog. All right, bye.
Yeah. It's the same as going to a hospital for a human. It's wild.
It is. Oh yeah. So I grew up in a very strict, conservative household. So Dungeons and Dragons was not allowed. But it is something I've never played, but is something that has interested me. There's, I forget his name. But there's some comedy guy on TikTok that like he hosts, Dungeons and Dragons, groups, and like he's the, what do you call like the moderator? Dungeon master. Yes. Yeah. He is the dungeon master. And like the way that he tells these stories, I'm just like, what next, Brennan? What is
Brennan Lee Mulligan is amazing.
Brennan Lee Mulligan.
Dimension 20 is super, super good. That's another one I listen to. Yeah. The other side of this wall is a custom D&D room in my house. So yes, I get it.
That's so good. Okay, cool. Yeah. I love Brendan Lee Mulligan. Yeah. I've seen him in a few different like comedy shows and stuff. But that probably because I've watched those on TikTok, they're like, if you like Brendan over here, check out this.
Yeah, the improv comedian to Dungeons and Dragons pipeline is very narrow because D&D is essentially just an improv game.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah, I'm getting more interested in it, which I think that Stranger Things is also kind of spurring that a lot, since there's direct correlation between. That's the Duffer Brothers. Like, that's how they created the whole thing.
There's a D&D movie coming out next year with a huge cast, so I think it'll blow up even more. Yeah.
Okay. Awesome.
Something I used to get ostracized for as a kid is now just pop culture.
So you're saying I need to go get a D20 now before the prices just skyrocket.
They're going to go up.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, okay, let's see. What am I loving this week? I'm also loving a new podcast. It is probably no one's heard of her, Elise Myers.
Love Elise.
Yeah. She has a podcast now, and It's really cool. It's a very different podcast. She like breaks the fourth wall, and it feels like she's just like listening to the interview with you, and then just like, oh, let me tell you about this part, and then does her whole, Elise talking head to the camera thing. But yeah, it's called Funny Because It's True. And it's a good podcast. I enjoy it. It's a fun little short conversation. She's had some cool celebrities on recently, and I think this week, as we're recording this, she had Jenna Fisher and Angela Kinley from The Office on, and the conversation went like super deep, which I was not expecting, and it was really good. So yeah, it's been a good,
because I love Elise. I didn't know she had a podcast.
Yeah, it's good. It's like a quick little 20 to 30 minute interview. So, but
Nice.
Well, sweet. Well, Dave, where can people find you? Where can they follow along? All of the places to find you online.
Yeah, I mean, I'm basically Dave Moss Coach everywhere. Instagram, TikTok, which I need to get back to doing. Facebook. My website is davemoss.coach or davemosscoach.com. Both work. So super simple to find me. I'm also active in my Facebook group, which is called Business as an Adventure, where that's mostly just business tips and things like that. But yeah, just pop me a DM if you ever have a question or anything. I'm an open book. I love talking to people. So
sweet. Awesome. Well, cool. Yeah, and I'll have links to all those places in the show notes for y'all listening. But yeah, well, Dave, thanks so much. It was great getting to chat with you, like one-on-one here. Like we've like briefly, like I'll comment and stuff whenever you do lives in your Business and Adventure group. But yeah, it's been nice to get to chat with you.
yeah, you as well. Thanks so much for having me.